Yo, what's up boys? It's Betta-ah here with my update video on the much awaited endgame version of my Power Siphon Trickster that's an actual minigunner now. While being super tanky, aside from being one shot when our defenses do fail. Please do not skip through the video as there's lots of valuable information, and should you have questions or need help, remember to pop into my Discord or live streams on Twitch. I am always willing to assist. So what can you expect from this build? We clock in at a whopping 11 attacks per second. That's where the minigunner comes from. Alongside with that, we've got 35 million pinnacle boss DPS, an effective hit pool of around about 300,000 plus. And then to top that off, we're on around about 4.8k ES alongside our trustworthy 80+% evade chance. And then to further even add on to that, we are elusive and crit immune with capped spell block and suppression too, making us really tanky. For sustain, overleech is paired with our recovery from absorption charges that we get from the Graven Secret Bout alongside a Watcher's Eye, giving us energy shield on hit as well. The expected budget for this endgame version, you can expect to spend around about 50 to 60 divines. However, things are starting to skyrocket for the build, especially in terms of the jewels and that as well. So if you want to buy everything as is, you can expect to spend around about 100 plus divines. In terms of the content that this build can do, it can do everything. I have done juiced up T17s with delirium. A lot of people in my community have done multiple Ubers. I tried a few myself as well, and they were very comfortable. Along with that, you can do any forms of juiced mapping, and I've also done multiple simulacrums on the build, and it was really comfortable to do so, and a lot of fun, especially when we fully ramped up and we're attacking at 11 attacks per second. It's a lot of fun to just see projectiles just going all over the screen. In terms of my strategy, I am juicing up jungle valleys with as many strong boxes as possible, and then putting on 60% delirium. And then in my atlas tree, I've taken as many of the scarab nodes as possible, so I can get a lot of scarab drops alongside with as much currency as possible from the boxes and from delirium too. And I have scribed my map to be onto jungle valley for the apothecary. That way, maybe I will get lucky. However, the only apothecary that I have gotten so far is from stacked decks. Alright, before I get into everything with the build, just do remember that all of the necessary links will be down below, including the path of building, my Discord, and my Twitch channel as well, should you be interested. In terms of gearing, the very first and the most important thing that you need to do is to acquire the chest with 3 white sockets, 1 blue, 1 red, and another blue. Or it can be 2 red and 1 blue, it doesn't really matter, so long as you've got 3 red and 3 blue available. So the easiest way to acquire this is if you go to your crafting bench, and you make your replica Heres a 3 socket first. Then what you're going to have to acquire is a few omens of blanching. What this does is when you use a normal chromatic orb on the item, you will have a chance of getting between 1 to 3 white sockets. So initially what you're aiming for is to get at least 3 white sockets. Over here I only got 2. When you do get 3 white sockets, what you're going to want to do then is go to your crafting bench, and then you're going to want to make the item 4 sockets in attempt to get a red or a blue. If you don't, then you go back to 3 sockets, then 4 sockets. There we got a blue. Then you'll jump on to 5, back to 4, then to 5 again, and so forth until you have acquired the colors for the chest. I do just want to note that this can also get really expensive in terms of how many jeweler orbs you end up spending, because each attempt can be at least 420 jeweler orbs, especially between 5 and 6 sockets. So if you would like to save up on some currency, maybe there will be one on the market that is already 3 blue or 3 red for you. Next up, the second most important thing for putting this endgame variant together will be the Ralakesh's Impatience. And what this does is it makes it so that you are always on your maximum amount of endurance, frenzy, and power charges, right? So in order to take full advantage of this item, we also use the Graven Secret Bout. So instead of us gaining being power charges, we are gaining absorption charges each. And now what absorption charges do is each of them recover 12% of spell damage as energy shield. And because we've got 10 power charges, we can recover 120% of all spell damage as energy shield, which is really, really great. Now, alongside with this belt as well, we are also using Malachai's Loop, which gives 2 to maximum power charges and a large chunk of spell damage. And then it also shocks us when we reach our maximum power charges, but because we aren't actually reaching our maximum power charges because of the Graven Secret belt, you don't have to actually worry about being shocked. Alright, moving on to our auras and your reservation real quick. You will have to get a level 3 Enlighten and then socket that with Discipline, Grace, and Wrath. And then on the side, we're going to have Tempest Shield with Precision that has to be level 10 or lower, because you must ensure that you've got at least 80 mana, otherwise you won't be able to cast your Sigil and everything while you are fully ramped up. As the level 3 Enlighten doesn't provide us with enough reservation efficiency, we opt for using a small cluster over here with mana reservation efficiency of skills and Sublime Form on it as well, just to further increase how much extra reservation we can have. Alright, moving on. So you see that we have got Tempest Shield, which gives 25% chance to block spell damage. Now the reason why we're using this is because we're also using the World Clash Helmet, which gives us 5% chance to block spell damage per power charge. And because we have got a total of 10 power charges, this gives us 50% chance to block spell damage. That way we are spell block capped really, really easily, and it's for free. And then also what the World Clash gives is 4%, well, it gives 3 to 5% increased elemental damage. In this instance, my roll is 4%, so I'm gaining 40% increased elemental damage. And then also we gain a power charge every second. If you haven't lost a power charge recently, this enables our Graven Secrets absorption charges to continuously be gained alongside with our power charge on crit. So this way we are continuously sustaining our absorption charges, so that way we can always recover energy shield from spell damage taken. On the helmet as well, you have to have +1 to maximum power charges. These are around about 6 to 8 divines depending on the rolls. You do not have to worry about getting the +2 to level of socketed aura gems, because there is not really many of these available. If anything, there is actually none available at this moment in time. And when there is, okay, well, there is one for 30 divines, but as you can see, you can expect to spend quite a lot just for a small bonus on your auras. One quick thing to note is that when you get your Wall Clash, you have to get the Light of Meaning, which transfers passive skills in radius, also grants 3% increased energy shield. The reason why you have to get this is because without the jewel, you'll only be on around about 4,000 energy shield, which is kind of dodgy, especially when you're doing Ubers or even T17s and simulacrums, because then you are more vulnerable to actually being one-shot. The only issue with this jewel, as you can see currently, they are around about 21, 22 divines. When I got mine, there were only 8 divines because the build has been getting a lot of people playing it. All of the jewels are skyrocketing. Even the Forbidden Flame has increased drastically in price as well. So do just note this in terms of your budget. With this being said, should you not be able to acquire the jewel or the World Clash helmet, do not worry. You can still just use the Crown of the Inward Eye. This will be perfectly fine for the time being. Or if you want, you can get a World Clash with a +1 to power charge. Just ensure that you're swapping out your gloves for a rare pair to make up for that lost energy shield that I just discussed. But I'll get onto the gloves in a minute or two though. In terms of capping spell suppression, we get 30% from the replica Hiri's Ire. And then on the skill tree, we've got Inveterate as well, alongside chance to suppress spell damage is lucky. This puts us at around about 96% effective spell suppression. Over here you can see it's only 79 at the moment, but you don't have to worry. As long as you've got that 96%, you will be perfectly fine with doing all content. And now in terms of sustaining our energy shield, I've swapped to using Soul Drinker, which enables energy leech effects are not removed when energy shield is filled, this enables us to have the overleach of energy shield. And the reason why this is really, really good is basically you are immortal unless you are actually being one shot. Alongside this, I'm also using a Watcher's Eye, whereby we gain 25 energy shield per enemy hit while affected by discipline, and the cannot be blinded, just to ignore some map modifiers. The reason why this is really, really good alongside our leech is because we're attacking at 11 attacks per second. We're able to gain a huge chunk of extra energy shield alongside with our leech, and of course alongside with our maximum absorption charges, which once again just enables us to be really, really tanky and to sustain our energy shield right through the roof, unless of course we are being one shot, which only realistically happens in simulacrums and maybe when you get detonate deaded in T17s as well. That does tend to happen quite a bit if you're not being aware. Moving on to the gloves is where we get our massive amount of attack speed, and what these gloves do is you eat a soul each time you hit a rare or a unique enemy, and now each soul gives you 5% increased attack speed, and fully ramped up on 45 souls you can expect to have at least 250% increased attack speed, which turns us into our actual minigunner form. With these gloves, you have to ensure that you have got a positive number to the maximum number of eaten souls and not a negative number, otherwise you will be losing out on much needed attack speed. Now, one thing to note is obviously during mapping, while you're looting and you're going around and that, you do lose the soul stacks very, very quickly. So I will only recommend using these on bosses because it is the only time when you can consistently keep on attacking and keep on gaining souls so you can fully ramp up. As an alternative over here, I use this rare pair of gloves with attack speed, high amount of energy shield, and gain rage on an attack hit. The reason why these are a good alternative, especially while looting and that, is because the rage on hits gives a extra 30% more damage multiplier, which is basically like adding a 7th link to our 6th link. And then of course some flat added lightning damage to attacks, and the increased damage while leeching just enables us to bump our damage a little bit further up. So with all of these uniques, you may be thinking, how the hell am I supposed to cap all of my resistances, right? Well, it's actually very, very easy. So all you need to do is acquire a rare ring in your right ring slot specifically, with as much resistances as possible, and then a bonus is the energy shield and any extra damage to attacks. If I were you, I would look for any ring that has an open prefix, that way you can craft on the lightning damage to attacks. Alongside this, we are also using a small cluster which has got 5 to all elemental resistances, and back to the sublimed form which also gives all elemental resistances. And then along with that, we are also using a large cluster, which gives us Veteran Defender for even more elemental resistances as well. Should you still be struggling to get your resistances capped in that, you can always opt for just using a rare pair of gloves in that. You don't have to use the Soul Ascension, but it really does make bossing 10 times easier and 10 times faster. Alright, moving on to exactly how you acquire your wand. It's not really the easiest craft to achieve, especially like mine over here where I've got the T1 spell damage roll. The chances of landing this with an essence is very, very slim. However, it is still worthwhile trying to get, and should you land a T2 spell damage roll or even T3 in that, it is perfectly fine. Do not worry about getting a perfect wand. But if you don't want to craft it, I'm sure that there will be some on the market, but they will be really, really expensive. So how exactly do you craft this? It's very, very easy. You just use Deafening Essences of Wrath on a fractured 19% attack speed imbued wand base. Now these bases at the moment are going for around about 10 to 15 divans. Sometimes you can probably snag one for like 7 divans. Just do note that it has to be at least R level 84, otherwise you cannot roll the T1 spell damage. So basically what you're going to do is you're just going to spam a bunch of the Deafening Essences of Wrath to either land T1 multi, or at least T1, T2, or T3 spell damage pretty much. When you do end up hitting a decent roll with T1 spell damage, or T2 or T3, as I did mention in that, the best way to ensure that you can end up locking it in, and that is if you go to your crafting bench and you put on cannot roll caster modifiers, you will have to use a Orb of Annulment. However, this is the best way to do it, because when you're using essences, you will always have 3 modifiers, so you will have to end up annulling off a modifier. Alright, and then should you hit your annul, then you are golden to multi-mod your item. So as a reference over here, I've got a T1 multi-roll that I managed to land, and I annulled off the other modifier that I didn't want, and then just multi-modded on spell damage with attacks, penetrate, elemental resistances. So this is just a secondary example of what you can do with your wand. You don't have to worry about getting one with T1 spell damage and that, because it is really, really difficult to land the modifier. Moving on to the gems real quick. I've already covered the auras and that. So in our chest, we are still using Power Siphon, but this time just the normal version. We no longer need the Vol version because our damage is absolutely insane and it's not necessary to use it anymore. And then of course damage on full life, because we are always full life. And then awakened elemental damage with attacks. This makes it so that you cannot take reflected elemental damage, just making your mapping experience a lot smoother. And then power charge on critical strike. The reason why we use power charge on critical strike is because we've got those 10 power charges that gives us 40% more damage in total. And then of course it also gives us the extra absorption charges generation, and then volatility for the more maximum attack damage. And the less minimum attack damage is not really that much of a train smash to us, because we are lightning damage based. Our minimum is really, really low anyway. And then for your last link, you must use awakened lightning penetration, further giving us even more penetration, so we can get to that nice threshold of being able to penetrate almost all enemy elemental resistances. And then even when we are not, we still have our elemental mastery, which allows us to invert enemy elemental resistances, which is multiplicative on top of our penetration as well. And then for movement, I'm still using Frost Blink and now a shield charge as well, because of Soul Ascension's huge amount of attack speed and that. While mapping, which is my choice, I'm now using shield charge. You're able to just blast through the map really, really fast, and makes it really, really comfortable. And then I'm still using Flame Wall to further buff our Power Siphon with some more fire damage. And I'm still using the automation with Immortal Core now, more duration and Sigil of Power. Do just note that automation only triggers instant spells in that, and as Immortal Call is the only instant spell here, it does not trigger Sigil of Power, so you can still manually cast your Sigil of Power. And then in the gloves, we're still using Sniper's Mark, Mark on Hit, alongside our Frost Shield and Inspiration for the less mana cost on it as well, just to make it so that it doesn't use as much mana. As you can see, it only takes 49 mana, and because we have a high recovery rate of mana in that, you will not have to worry about proccing your Immortal Core or your Sniper's Mark while putting down your Sigil of Power and your Frost Shield while bossing. Moving on to the flasks real quick, I'm just using a Rot Gut because it gives a 50% chance to gain a flask charge when you deal a critical strike, and it has the increased duration, which is much better than a normal Quicksilver. You can use a normal Quicksilver yourself, and also just note that you're not gaining Onslaught because you are not consuming any frenzy charges during the effect. As you can see, we don't have the Onslaught buff. And then you must use a Jade alongside a Topaz, a Sapphire, and a Ruby. This allows us to take even more elemental damage without actually having to worry about it. And this also allows you to face tank almost every single spell in the game, and that aside from Uber Shaper's beam and balls, of course. And then on these flasks, you must have chance to avoid being stunned, because we are pairing it with our mastery, whereby 50% of your energy shield is added to your stun threshold as well. This way you don't get stun locked, because in our Pantheon we don't actually have it anymore, but I'll get onto that in a bit. And then for your other flask, just some movement speed along with increased evasion rating and reduced effect of curses on you. And you must make sure that all of your flasks have got the chance to gain a flask charge when you deal a critical strike, so you can maintain permanent uptime on your flasks, along with the enchant used when charges reach full. Alright, quickly moving on to the Pantheon, you must use Soul of Lunaris for the additional physical damage reduction and movement speed and the reduced elemental damage taken as well. And then the Soul of Aberrath for the unaffected by burning ground and increased movement speed while on burning ground. Remember that we are immune to all elemental ailments aside from Scorch and everything in that, because on our ring we have cannot be ignited. And then of course the Temper Shield also gives us immunity to shock, and then because of our ascendancy with one step ahead, we cannot be frozen or chilled either. In terms of bossing, I recommend that you use Soul of Solaris for the increased physical damage reduction and the 20% chance to take less damage and the reduced elemental damage taken if you haven't been hit. And then along with that, to use Soul of Tukohama for even more physical damage reduction, as because we are standing still for at least 3 seconds at a time while dodging boss mechanics and that. It is a pretty decent uptime. However, should you want to use any others than that, it is entirely up to you. It's just my personal preference to use these. Alright, last but not least, in terms of doing T17 mapping and simulacrums as well, I would recommend that you pick up multi-shot, and the reason why is for the attack mastery, so monsters cannot block your attacks. Now, how you will achieve this is over here by your arcing blows. You will just unspec these 4 points here, along with marked enemies cannot regenerate life, and then you can assign these 5 points right here. So that way monsters cannot block your attacks. It just makes it much more comfortable and a lot easier to speed through the maps without actually standing there and having to attack 3 million times to kill enemies that block your attacks, especially with the T17 map modifier as well. It just makes things a lot easier on you. Alright, and that is it for this update video. I hope I clarified as much information as possible, and should you need any help with the build, please do join my community Discord or even pop into my live streams over on Twitch. And also, should you have enjoyed the video, please drop a like and also subscribe to my channel. I'll appreciate it. Other than that, boys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video or live stream.